Hi, my name is Pamela Deneuve, and I'd like to welcome you to our very first online roundtable discussion for professional development leaders. This is a three-part session for the essential keys for professional development leaders for success in 2018. Today, we're so privileged and pleased to have Anne Brafford, who's the author of a new book, Positive Professionals: Creating High-Performing, Profitable Firms Through the Science of Engagement. Anne was also the editor-in-chief of the recent report by the National Task Force on Lawyer Well-Being, and her book was published by ABA, by the American Bar Association, and is available online for you. We hope that this training and this online discussion will help your firm to go to the next level and increase your success in 2018. Again, my name is Pamela Deneuve, and thank you so much for joining us. Welcoming you, and these are the essential keys for professional development leaders. Just want to let you know that we do have a couple more sessions, one on Tuesday, January 23rd, which is going to be designed to help you get the best return of investment on your professional development programs. And on the 31st, we're going to talk a little bit about associates and how we can use tools to try to keep our associates. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Anne. Anne is going to be discussing the hot topic of lawyer well-being initiatives. She is the editor-in-chief of the recent report by the National Task Force on Lawyer Well-Being, and she is the author of the new book, Positive Professionals: Creating High-Performing, Profitable Firms Through the Science of Engagement, which is available on Shop ABA website, and we'll put that in the chat box before it's over. Anne is going to, she's the founding member of Aspire, an educational and consulting firm for the legal professions, and we'll put that link also in the chat box. She's the chairperson of the American Bar Association's Law Practice Division's Attorney Well-Being Committee, and is a member of multiple other national and local level attorney well-being initiatives. After practicing for 18 years, Anne left her job as an equity partner at Morgan Lewis Bacchus LLP to focus on thriving in the legal profession. In 2014, she earned a master's degree in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, and she's now in her fourth year as a PhD student in positive organization psychology in Claremont Graduate University. Anne will give us an overview of the National Task Force recommendations for law firms. She'll give tips for boosting well-being and engagement and beating burnout, and explain the business case for lawyer well-being, including productivity, profitability, and retention of millennials and other lawyers. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you so much for having me, Pamela. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks again, Pamela, for having me and for that nice introduction, from which you can tell that really what I'm doing now is focusing entirely on lawyer well-being. That's why I went back to school to really understand how organizational psychology and positive psychology can contribute to the legal profession in addressing some of these issues of lack of well-being, but also figuring out what really is optimal wellness and optimal well-being, and how, as an entire profession, can we start incorporating science to try to live up to our best selves as a profession. So what I'm going to talk about today is, first I'm going to talk rather generally about the National Task Force on Lawyer Well-Being report that just came out in August 2017. And within that, there are a number of recommendations about what law firms can do to start developing their own well-being initiatives. So then in the second part of my talk, I'm going to talk kind of specifically about engagement, about what it is, and get into just a few tips. I'll only be talking about 30 or 40 minutes, so we won't have a lot of it, but it will give you a nice overview of if you're interested in starting a well-being initiative, where you might start, and what are some of the topics and tools that you might use. So let's get my PowerPoint up. All right, Pamela, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right, so let's get started in talking about the report itself. So I was the editor-in-chief and co-author, so I wrote substantial parts of it, did almost all of the research that supports the recommendations. And that was one of the things that was very important to the task force, was that we wanted our recommendations to be science-based to the extent that there was science that could guide them. Lawyers are really smart and have lots of good ideas and recommendations themselves, but we wanted to also make sure that this wasn't just coming from experience, but also coming from science. And so that was part of my contribution. So what it's about, what is the report about, and what's in it for law firms? So the report itself, it grew out of a couple of studies that came out in 2016. There was one about lawyers and one about law students. And they both created a sense of urgency for people in the profession who were really focused and concerned about lawyer well-being. And you've likely heard, if you're kind of paying attention to lawyer well-being at all, you've surely heard of the study that was sponsored by COLAP and the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation. It was 13,000 lawyers, so a really enormous study. I think the largest of its kind. And some of the findings in particular really got people's attention. And the two big ones that popped out were alcohol abuse and depressive symptoms. And the alcohol abuse in particular got people's attention because that rate of 20%, and it's actually the variance when it went to like 21 to 36% of lawyers are potentially in trouble with alcohol. And that's like 3 to 4 times greater than the general population. And so it does really look like this is an issue specifically within the legal profession, that when there is stress with lawyers, they turn to alcohol. And that tends to be, as you know, all of you know who are in the legal profession, that's true. That's what lawyers do. They go to bars and there's always alcohol at events. And so it really is part of the culture. And then depressive symptoms as well were elevated. It's hard to compare them to any national statistics, because the number I have there of the 28% is all levels. So it's mild to moderate to severe. And so we don't really know within that. It's the moderate and the severe that we would really be concerned about. And we're not really sure. We'd have to go into the data to find out. But in any event, we no matter what the national standards are, that's a number that we would want to be lower within the legal profession, because there's so much science showing that alcohol abuse and depression and other mental health disorders really influence the competency of lawyers' ability to practice law and frankly, and be happy and satisfied with their work. Those suicidal thoughts, I just want to say something about that number, because that number does look quite high. And what the question was, have you ever in your life experienced suicidal thoughts? And so that's why that number is a bit inflated. It wasn't like, in the past year, which is what the other ones were focused on. And in addition to the report, so these studies that also a law student one, which also had the alcohol abuse number was pretty astounding within the law student population as well. So this really got the attention of people that wanted to say, like, okay, we finally have the information. There hasn't been a study like this of this breadth. We have to do something about it. We can't just sit on it. And it wasn't just the physical and mental health issues either. Like, there was a recognition that there's something going on within the legal profession culture that is contributing to these issues. And so we want to think about this contextually as an issue for the legal profession and not just an issue for individual lawyers who are struggling with these issues. And so what I'm going to do now, if you've seen the report, it can be a little daunting. It's sort of big and thick, and so it might create some paralysis of just thinking that you can't get through it. So what I want to do is just walk through what I think the most important parts are for law firms, for legal employers in particular. So then you can really focus your efforts. If you want to dig into the recommendations, focus your efforts, because there's a lot in the report that isn't really relevant to law firms. Because what the basic structure of the report is that there's an introduction and then general recommendations that really apply to the entire profession. And then it goes stakeholder by stakeholder. So it goes, talks about judges and bar associations, and all the different stakeholders, and then legal employers, which is the most relevant portion for law firms, of course. And so how the report starts is it tries to get some evidence and rationale for why care? Why is it that we're feeling this sense of urgency, and why should law firms and other stakeholders in the legal profession care to take action? And so the first thing is, of course, it's the right thing to do. If there's things that are going on in the profession within law firms that are contributing to these problems, we should feel a sense of responsibility for our colleagues' well-being. In the second issue, of course, is that lawyer well-being is an issue of competence. That lawyers who are struggling with mental or physical impairments just aren't going to be able to be their best selves. And there's much evidence showing that these types of problems contribute to disciplinary actions and just poor performance and complaints by clients. It's something like it's between 70 and 80% of all disciplinary proceedings against lawyers are somehow tied to alcohol abuse or depression or other mental health disorder. So this is it's a really serious issue for lawyer competence, and the ABA model rules and every state's professional responsibility rules require that lawyers maintain competence to practice law. So that's another reason that lawyer well-being is important. And of course, no lawyer goes into the profession thinking, I just want to be minimally competent. That's what I'm after. I just want to not be ill. What we all want as professionals, whether we're lawyers or not, is to be healthy and fully thriving and to live up to our full potential. And so that's where the next rationale gets in, is it's good for business. When you have lawyers that are not just not depressed, but actually excited and thriving and doing physically well, they are going to contribute to the success of your business. And the report lays out some of the statistics and evidence for that engaged, healthy people are much more productive, contributed to profitability, and lots of other factors that law firms and other organizations care about. In my book, which I'll talk about later, just last November, the ABA published my book called Positive Professionals, and it's entirely about engagement in the legal profession, and it gives more evidence there too for the business case. Because for me, of course, I think it's the morally right thing to do, but I think to convince businesses, understandably, that it's important for them to also understand what the business case is, in addition to just feeling a moral sense of responsibility to their colleagues. So after setting out the reasons why we should take action in the legal profession, it then defines well-being. So if we're going to have a report about lawyer well-being, we should know what we're talking about. And this is the definition that's provided in the report. And it really emphasizes the idea that lawyer well-being is a continuous process. It's something that we're always doing all of the time, individually and organizationally, focusing on these issues. It's not like an Easter egg hunt, that once you find well-being, all is good, and nothing else needs to be done. So it emphasizes that point of a continuous process, and also that it's that the idea that I mentioned before, that well-being isn't just a matter of not being sick, it's a matter of being fully well. And if that's our focus, then it is multidimensional. And we wanted to emphasize that point for lawyers who, especially lawyers in law firms, who can get very tunnel visioned, I know from experience, of just being really focused on achievement, and success at work. to the detriment of the other areas of their lives, ultimately leading to physical and mental health problems. And so we really wanted to emphasize that this is a multidimensional issue for the individual and the profession, that context is an enormous contributor. It's not just an individual responsibility, it's a responsibility of the firms and other areas where these lawyers are embedded as well. And to come up with this definition, we look to definitions elsewhere, both within industry and also within other organizations like the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization's definition really emphasizes this point of health also has these positive affirmative aspects, that it's not just about disease or infirmity, it's about being fully well. And that really brings in the positive psychology perspective that is my background and my focus, that eliminating disease is really important. And positive psychology doesn't in any way seek to undercut the importance of that. It's just that for decades, that's all anyone has ever focused on, is curing illness. But finally, those in the social sciences began realizing, again, it's sort of cyclical, it comes up like, I don't know, every 50 years, that there was something more to life than just not being sick. Just because I wasn't sick, just because I got up to zero, doesn't mean that I'm living my potential, which is really what full health should be defined as. And so that's the perspective we took in the report, that although the house is burning on some of these issues, like it's very important to address the alcohol abuse and depression. But even if you take the worst case scenario for those statistics of mental health disorders and alcohol abuse, you still have a majority of the profession that is not suffering from a diagnosable illness, but it doesn't mean they're well. And as all of you know, due to your connection with the law firm, there's so many lawyers that are very ambivalent about their work. That there are things about it that they like, but many, high percentage say that if they were able to do it again, they wouldn't. And they really struggle with being happy, and they're more just living day to day rather than feeling fully well. And so we wanted to get to those people as well, not only focus on the importance of detecting and treating disease, but also really try to get at and root out, to the extent that we can, problems within the profession and within our organizational cultures that are contributing to these problems. So as I mentioned before, the structure of the report is, first it starts with these general recommendations. And for the most part, I list all of them for law firms, that these recommendations aren't enormously long. And I think they're good to look through to get ideas about where you might want to focus your own well-being initiatives. Sorry, I don't have a watch up. Okay, so it's things like, number 3, that leaders should demonstrate a personal commitment to well-being. That if you have like partners and organizational leaders that themselves are not demonstrating well-being, which I would say is a lot of them, that you get to that kind of a place because you've been willing to sacrifice a whole lot else in your life. And if those are really the only role models you have, then lawyers think that that's what they have to do to succeed, and it has a huge impact on culture. And so to really make a shift, the leadership of the firms need to be aware of how their own conduct is affecting culture and influencing other people's behavior. And then 4 is facilitate, destigmatize, and encourage help-seeking behaviors. That it is generally true that seeking help for depression and alcohol abuse is stigmatized, and it's especially true within the legal profession. Lawyers as a whole tend to have personalities where they feel like they want to do it themselves. They don't feel like they need help. And much research shows that, especially with depression, the more depressed people become, the less likely it is that they think seeking help will help. And so they don't. And so really, it's really important within our firms to think about, how can we encourage help-seeking, understanding the personality dynamics before problems really get out of hand. And then you can see the other areas. All of these offer different good ideas to think about. And then we get specifically to the legal employer recommendations. And it's not long, that's only pages 31 to 34 that are easy to get through. And as you'll see just from my summary, and also hopefully when you have a chance to look at the report, is that it does take the perspective of, it really is important to set up ways to detect and treat disease. But we also really need to look at ourselves. Firms need to look in the mirror and take some responsibility for how their policies and practices contribute to well-being or undermine well-being. So the left side of things more like, monitoring for addiction and those things they're more about the disease model. Then you get over into the others that are more in the, let's figure out within our policies, is there something about our billing, our billable hour requirements, our work-life balance policies, all of these, our diversity policies that contribute to or undermine lawyer well-being. And so there, I put the sites of the appendix D and B in particular. B was in relation to, there's a recommendation in the general recommendations that law firms and other organizations should undertake high quality training that's related to lawyer well-being. And then here in Appendix D, it's related to the recommendation to establish policies and practices. So let's get to those. So Appendix B, I wrote, so hopefully you feel confident that there's good science and good recommendations there. That what I wanted to do in Appendix B is just it's sort of like issue spotting, of give firms ideas for the content of training that they might try to develop. What I've heard repeatedly when I speak and write on lawyer well-being topics is that there are people that are more and more interested in developing initiatives, but they don't really know where to start, and they're struggling with what topics that even means. And so I wanted to give some ideas for firms wanting to take the approach of understanding that there are things that are going on in the firm culture organizationally that can contribute to well-being or that can harm well-being. Here's some ideas. And so there's the Appendix B gives summaries of ideas and the science to support that this is something that can help well-being, including reducing depression and potential alcohol abuse. And then Appendix D gives you a checklist for if you want to think about your own policies and practices within your firm, kind of a checklist of what policies to look at and some of the ideas that you might want to consider. And then Appendix C, I want to mention just quickly that especially with the transition of older lawyers has always been an issue for a long time in law firms, of making that difficult transition for lawyers who have committed their entire lives to the firm and don't always want to leave, aren't always ready to leave because this is where their identity is. It's now becoming more of an issue of professional competency, because with the large baby boomer population that is now getting into their older years, there is a growing issue of Alzheimer's and other cognitive issues, and firms and other legal organizations not knowing how to address that. The discomfort of seeing, one of your respected colleagues declining and not knowing how to address that. And so there's a bit in the report about that, and the appendix addresses some recommendations for handling those sensitive topics as well. And there's also a little bit about, again, trying to take a more proactive approach of thinking about, I think I called it a reorientation program, of trying, or, offboarding, that we have these huge, wonderful onboarding programs for new lawyers, but we don't have a lot for offboarding for older lawyers. And I've seen some instances of, what I thought was incredibly sort of disrespectful behaviors of lawyers who have committed their entire lives to a career, growing a firm, and then basically told you, we're throwing you out and don't let the door hit you in the backside. Where for lawyers whose identity is entirely wrapped up in the legal profession, which is true for many of the older lawyers, wouldn't it be helpful and wonderful and maybe the right thing to do to think about earlier, maybe 5 or more years before they might getting to that place, of helping them start thinking about what they might do next. Where can they find meaning and purpose in their life outside of work? And maybe there are other things that they can do in connection with the firm. So some of those ideas are in the report and the appendices as well. And then a few tools and resources, like if you're interested in really starting your own, developing a well-being initiative, there's a lot out there, and that I and other people are developing. These are a few things that I've done. The first one is just a Florida Bar Journal article that was just published. If you Google its name and my name, it'll pop up. But it basically just gives, it's a list of, here are some ideas for tools you can use. So like, let's say you wanted to evaluate burnout in your firm, here's a free scale for you to use that you can find on the internet. It's stuff like that. If I tried to be really concrete for people wanting to find tools to help them with their initiatives. And then the next thing, the well-being toolkit for the legal profession, is an expanded version. I actually wrote that before I wrote the Florida Bar Journal article. And I put it together in part for some other things, but then developed it more for a CoLAP conference that I was speaking at. And you can find it on the web, on the CoLAP's website. It's a little hard to find, I thought, so I'm happy to give Pamela the link and she can distribute it. It's basically a booklet. And the booklet, some of it is worksheets of like things that lawyers can actually do to enhance their own well-being. And then there's more, tools as well, kind of very concrete tools that you can use. And then the last thing, of course, is Positive Professionals, my book, that the whole book, it's oriented toward it, it defines engagement and burnout, but really the bulk of the book is what can firms do in a concrete way? What are strategies that we can undertake as a firm to enhance engagement? And the real heart of the book is enhancing the experience of meaningful work, which is the highest predictor of engagement and also is negatively related to depression and burnout. I guess not a surprise, but it's something that I think lawyers get too caught up and forget that their spiritual life of meaning and purpose is important as well. Okay, it's 10:32, so I think I can get through these pretty quickly. So what I want to do now, like as I said, one of the training topics in the report, one of the recommended training topics was engagement, which is really workplace well-being is what engagement is, and beating burnout. So what I'm going to do now, and this is the focus of my book and a real focus of my work as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what engagement is and then give like just a couple of strategies, and then we can get to some questions. So the idea of what engagement is it's made up of 3 basic dimensions. It's vigor, which is an energy component of I feel strong and energetic and enthusiastic at work. There's another dimension or factor called dedication, and that's where it gets into like I feel meaning and purpose in my work, and I feel challenged in my work. And then the last dimension is a thing that they call it's often called absorption, but really it's flow, if you're familiar with that topic. And basically what that is in my work, I feel optimally challenged. People don't like to be bored. They don't like to be underutilized. They like to fully have all their talents and skills and strengths be involved in their work. And when that happens, when you're optimally challenged, you can continually be in this wonderful state of flow, of feeling like you're really doing important work that is taking advantage of your best skills. So basically, like what engagement is like what are you when you're best at your work? That's what engagement is. So what does that look like, and what does that feel like? Oh, and first, of course, I wanted to really emphasize that meaningful work, the experience of meaningful work, has shown in multiple studies that really is the heart of engagement, of people want to feel that they're doing something significant. So what does that look like and feel like? So this is from ELF. It is not this. This is not what engagement is. I think there's a misconception for people who maybe don't know a lot about positive psychology and the more positive perspective of thinking, oh, we're just trying to say that everyone should be happy all the time, and that's not realistic. And that's true. That is not realistic, and that is not what engagement is, and that's not what positive psychology is about. So if it's not this, what is it? And so I tried to come up with a good example that maybe we would be familiar with. And so hopefully you've all seen The Martian. I think I've seen it 20 times, and I highly recommend it. It's just a fantastic movie that demonstrates so many human competencies of, like, you know, someone at their best. And so if you haven't seen the movie, it won't be a spoiler. It's, you know, in the trailers, that what happens is the astronaut Mark Watney gets left behind on a trip to Mars. They think he's dead, and so he's left behind. There won't be a return mission for 4 years. So he has to figure out how to stay alive with no food, or with the food that was left for him, and make that last for 4 years, and lots of other things. And so his approach, and you see him, like, the psychology of this going back and forth of initially feeling defeated, but then realizing, if I'm going to survive, I'm going to have to bring my full self to this. And so he has this great line of, I'm going to have to science the shit out of this. And what you see through the movie is it's such a great example of, like, what engagement is that there's a strong sense of meaning and purpose, not just because he's trying to keep himself alive, though that's what's going to create meaning and purpose for anyone, but also the sense of being an astronaut and doing important work. And it comes up repeatedly through the movie of how important he realizes what he's doing. Also a big part of engagement is fit with your work. That you feel like you are contributing something of value through your strengths, that my strengths are needed here and valued. And that's very much on display in this movie. And positive emotions are important, and you actually even see a lot of positive emotions from the astronaut Mark Watney, even though he's, you know, always sort of near death on Mars, left alone. But positive emotions and happiness is only part of what engagement is. And that really contributes to, like, the vigor piece that I was talking about, the enthusiasm. But there's so much more to feeling engaged and being part of an organization that supports engagement. And to understand, an easy way to kind of conceptualize what engagement is a scale. It looks kind of like our scales of justice. And on the one hand are what I call boosters, which are all the energy giving aspects of our work. So things like experience meaningfulness, autonomy, feedback, fairness, all of these things that research shows are very important to worker well-being, to feeling engaged and resilient and strong. On the other side are all the things that I call stressors, which are the things that are depleting about your work and just take your energy rather than giving you energy. So it's things like a too big of a workload that you don't feel like you can handle, time pressures, task conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, those kinds of things. And the basic idea of the scale is that when your boosters are tipping the scale, that's where you're more likely to be experiencing engagement. But where we get out of whack, where our resources are low and we're constantly being depleted and not having time to rejuvenate and take advantage of our resources, then stressors tip the scale and we're headed for disengagement, depression, burnout, and possibly leaving. So I think this is a useful idea of, like, we talk about work-life balance, but this is the balance that we're after, is boosters and stressors from wherever they come, whether they're coming from home or work. This is the balance we need to be thinking about. Where am I concentrating on developing my boosters, and is my organization helping me do so? Am I concentrating as well on diminishing stressors to the extent that I can? And why should businesses care? Lots of research already, always growing, showing that engagement is positively related to many things that law firms care about from a business perspective. So better individual performance, higher profitability or productivity, client satisfaction, all these good things that when organizations that have a higher percentage of highly engaged people are experiencing this. On the other side, burnout is just depleting. It produces turnover. There's lots of work done within the medical profession showing that doctors who are burned out have a decline in the quality of their work. decline in their ethics. They're more likely to cheat and lie, depression, substance abuse, all of these kinds of things. And there's not yet been a study done on the prevalence of burnout in the legal profession. Hoping to work on that next. But we know that depression is highly related to burnout, and so it's probably quite high. And if you have a bunch of burned out lawyers, you're just not going to have optimal performance within your organization. A few myths about engagement. Of course, the big one for lawyers is that compensation is the biggest driver of engagement. That's really what firms focus on to motivate. And so much research showing that that's not true. Compensation can be looked at more as a hygiene factor than a motivating factor. So there's things that you have to have to not be mad. So if you think about like washing your hands, you need to wash your hands so that you don't get sick, but that doesn't make you fully well. Compensation is kind of like that. You better pay me fairly, but so that I'm not upset, but that doesn't inspire me. There's other things about the work in the organization that contribute to engagement where you just have to be compensated enough so you can take it off the table and we're not thinking about it anymore. Next myth is that whether someone feels engaged is their own responsibility. And I do think this is a historical perspective of law firms that, well, it's not my problem. That if individual lawyers are feeling depleted or a lack of meaningfulness, that's their own problem that they need to fix. And what the research shows, and really overwhelmingly to me in going through this organizational psychology program, has been underscored how important context is. And research in both engagement and especially burnout show that organizational factors are way more important than individual competencies like resilience and resilience to stress and those kinds of things. The environment has an enormous influence on whether people are able to be well. And so hopefully firms will growingly want to take responsibility for helping their lawyers be their best. And the last is that what engages me also engages other people. That I think we all have a tendency to think that, whatever I like, everyone else likes as well. Whatever I think, everyone else thinks as well. And of course, that's just not true. And so what I encourage for people who are just coming to engagement, that there are some things in it that I might say, here's a great strategy. And the response might be, well, that doesn't engage me, or that's not true for me. That might be true. But even if it isn't, what I'm talking about is on average. So it's probably true for a lot of other people in the organization. So try to keep an open mind. So engagement strategies, again, this is meaning to emphasize that it's both individual and organization. It's too important to just leave to the responsibility of individuals because the organization has such an enormous effect. So job crafting is what we can do individually in our jobs to make them more interesting and meaningful. So connections are things like trying to connect more with people that energize us and connect less with people who deplete us. Content are things like, are there ways for me to focus more on things that excite me and that I'm good at, my strengths and talents? Can I do more of that and do less of stuff that I'm not as good at? For job design is more from an organizational level, are the things that we can do to tweak jobs to make them more engaging. Leader framing emphasizes that what leaders say about work and about the organizational mission has an enormous impact on whether lawyers feel that their work is important, which is a big contributor to engagement. And then personal interactions, of course, of just reminding us that every single day as we're interacting with each other, we have an opportunity to push a green light or to push a red light. And all these things accumulate. Like, in my little bits of interaction, did I make you feel good or did I make you feel bad? And those accumulate to help or harm our engagement. And in the book, I go through, I synthesized an enormous amount of research in this area and came up with 6 psychological experiences of engagement. And that's what engagement is. It's a mental state. It's a positive mental state made up of psychological experiences that, as employers, these are what we want lawyers to be cognitively feeling and thinking, because it then produces the behavior that leads to optimal performance both individually and organizationally. So the book goes through each of these 6 experiences and gives strategies for generating them. And real quick, I'm just going to give one strategy for my work matters. And my example for this, it comes from one of my other favorite films, Hidden Figures. And the idea here is they kept in hopefully you've seen this film. It's a really excellent film about 3 African-American women who are incredible mathematicians and engineers who contributed to NASA in the 1960s. And they were trying to get an astronaut up into space, and they were having all kinds of problems. And this was Al Harrison, who was leading the mathematicians and engineers, trying to inspire people to understand that this really matters to people, that we need to give all of ourselves to this work right now, because it matters to the astronauts, their wives, if they lose their husbands. It's going to matter to all of us and to the country. And so this is an example of really a leader emphasizing the importance and significance of people's work to inspire them. And the my work matters, what that means is that we each in our work have a sense that we're having a positive impact and making a difference in the world. So the I matter that I'm not going to talk about, that's more is interpersonal significance, that I feel valued and valuable by my organization. And this is more about the work as a whole. So does my work make me feel like I'm part of something larger than myself? Am I proud of my firm? Am I proud of my practice group? And also, do I know the positive impact of my own work, of not only generally speaking, whether my organization is doing good things, but is my work specifically having a positive impact on people? So another one of my favorite movies that I've seen tons of times is Jerry Maguire. And hopefully you've seen this movie. And what's going on in this scene, it's toward the end of the film, where his client, Rod Tidwell, had really lost his meaning in his job, which was a professional football player, and only been focusing on the money. Show me the money, show me the money. And they, through the process of the movie, they both go from being kind of more externally oriented toward being internally oriented, and creating a real friendship in which Rod came to realizing his love for the sport, and through this whole thing, they became great friends, and they were clients. This was a consultant client kind of relationship. And what this idea emphasizes is the importance of purpose beyond profit. It's not just about show me the money, and connections to clients. There's a lot of work done in the social sciences showing the impact of being connected to the beneficiary of your work. And so for lawyers, it's both your clients, but also your internal clients. So other folks, the lawyers and staff that you're impacting. And what the research shows that the more often you're able to connect with those people and also hear about the benefit and positive impact of your work, the more energizing and inspiring it is. And research suggests that it really is the biggest factor in creating the experience of meaningfulness, which in turn has the biggest impact on engagement. And so quickly, there's one study that I think is fascinating that demonstrates this. There's a group of college students who were, they were in the phone bank that were calling to solicit donations to contribute to a scholarship fund for students that were going to that college. Sounds like an awful job that I wouldn't want to have. I've done phone banks before. And what they did in the study is they asked a few of the scholarship recipients, people who benefited from these callers' work, come in and just give, 5 minutes, a 5-minute conversation about how their work benefited them. Because you were doing this, I was able to get a scholarship to come to school, and here's all the, why that was so meaningful to me and the positive impact that I had. And what they showed is the college students who had that brief interaction, their number of calls increased by something like 150%. And the revenue they generated was close to 200%. It was like an increase by like 170%. Just by this 5-minute interaction of making them feel energized, like my work is meaningful. I need to do this to help other people. And so this was a good idea that law firms could tried to incorporate that instead of having panels of clients only talking about, which I heard a lot of, clients talking about like all the crappy things their lawyers have done, the top 10 mistakes lawyers make. Wouldn't it be nice to think of ways to connect in more positive ways with our clients so that we could take advantage of this really inspiring, engaging effect when we realize that we're doing good things in the world that are impacting specific people? So I hope you take just a few minutes when we're done here to think about some of the things from the report, and then we talked about engagement of, what can I do within my organizations to start improving engagement and really helping people feel important and that their work matters. It'll be worth your while, because if we can improve engagement, we're really going to have law firms full of lawyers at their best. And then, of course, my book is available on Shop ABA. So if you're interested in learning more about engagement, I'd be delighted if you check my book out. And that is all. Again, Pamela, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I hope we still have some time for questions.
Thank you, Anne. I have put the link in there for Anne's book, as well as her link for her website. So Branny is my assistant, and she's going to unmute you for questions. So anybody have questions, you would go into participant and raise your hand. Okay, any questions?
I don't see anyone.
Okay, well, I'll ask a question. And a couple people ask about these slides. Are these slides available, or are they your personal presentation slides?
Sure, I can make them available, no problem.
Okay, great. So if you would email me, I can make her slides available. I want to say personally about, is it an echo?
A little bit.
Okay. If I could tell you a little bit about her book. I had a presentation this week about millennials, and I actually used Anne's book as a textbook. I mean, it has such rich information about engagement and so forth. So, I think every law firm should try to have a copy, and it's really pertinent, because as professional development leaders and individuals who work with educating the lawyers, I think that professional development is the backbone of the firm, really. This is kind of the spine to keep everything together, and you really would like to be aware and kind of steering the education towards this new information. And I did send everyone the report. So if you need a copy, please, I gave you the link to that. Please let me know.
And Pamela, that reminds me that I did mean to say something about millennials. It was in our description of what we were going to talk about today. And the reason this all relates to millennials is all the research showing that millennials are saying, and I think voting with their feet as well, that they want more meaningful work, that they don't want their job just to be, a transaction for pay. And that they are more likely to stay in organizations where they feel that they are making a valuable contribution, that their strengths and skills matter, and that their organization is doing something that they're proud of. And that's really what engagement is. Like, that's what it's about. And so trying to take some of these strategies to cultivate the experience of meaningful work should help attract and retain millennial lawyers. And the same is true for women. My other big area of research is retaining and engaging women lawyers. And what the research shows on that is everybody wants meaningful work. It's important for everybody's engagement. But as far as turnover goes, women are more likely to leave when they don't have it than men. And there's all kinds of interesting socialization and biology reasons for that. But it appears to be true. And so really focusing on cultivating this, feeling of being valued and doing valuable work could contribute to both engagement efforts, but also retention of millennials and women. And it'll be curious to see whether as law firms really start getting involved in developing well-being initiatives, might they be something that millennial lawyers and then whatever generation comes after them, that will start distinguishing law firms? That, I knew when I was coming out of law firm, like all the big law firms look the same. It was very hard to distinguish them based on anything other than pay. And most of that was very similar as well. So it was sort of a crapshoot. But if you start having programs like this, that's really communicating to young lawyers that we care about you as a whole human being, not just as a person who can bill hours. It's an interesting question to me to see how this evolves, to see whether that might not be a recruiting tool as well.
Someone asked the question, thank you, Anne, for talking about millennials. Do you have a workbook that they could use for classroom settings, or is there one?
Oh, that's such a great question. I'm working on one, but I don't yet.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yes, knife in my heart. I am working on it. I wish it was done already.
Okay.
And we're also, if classroom means, I think there was a few people from law school. There's another, hopefully, another one of my projects with a law professor friend of mine who's from Duke, that we're hoping to do the next book that will be Positive Psychology on the Law School campus, that really takes this research as well and talks about what can we do within law schools. That, again, it's not just an individual resilience issue. There's stuff that's going in the law schools that's contributing to these issues that we should pay attention to.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? Okay, again, if anyone would like to have a recording of this, please email me at pamela@pameladeneuve.com, and I'd be happy to see that you get a copy of that. Also, just to remind you that this is the first of 3 sessions. Our next session, we're going to be talking about how to get the best return on investment on your educational information, as well as our final one, which will be talking specifically about associates, and there'll be people from CoLab who will actually be talking about that. So it'll be a good opportunity for you. So again, email me because I won't have access to this information here in the Zoom room. So email me at Pamela. I'll type it again, Pamela@pameladeneuve.com, and I will send you a recording. Okay, thank you all so much. And we really, this is such a valuable training, and it's so needed. And I appreciate you making time out of your extremely busy schedule to come and make time to spend and deliver this message to professional development professionals.
All right, thanks so much for having me.
Okay, all right, thank you all for being here. Goodbye.